little bit of these ladies' time. My name is Claude Barrickman, and I'm a lawyer in Cozad, Nebraska. I'm well acquainted with Carol Dart, who's one of our presenters this morning. She and I have worked together on family group conferences and pre-hearing conferences that we do in Dawson County. Laurie Mcewen is your other presenter. I'm not going to say too much about their bios. They're in the materials. They'll share a little bit about their experiences while they're presenting today. I was asked to make just a comment or two about the subject, and it occurred to me, ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. I'm not really sure how it got that name. It seems to me that human beings have been having disputes ever since there was a little disagreement over some fruit in the garden, and have been resolving those disputes in ways that are much more like what you're going to hear about from these ladies than what us lawyers do to resolve disputes. It seems to me that perhaps litigation should be called alternative dispute resolution. But with that, I have really enjoyed and seen the benefit of family group conferencing, as well as the pre-hearing conferences that we do now that apply to more specifically to the juvenile work. And I'm anxious to hear more from these two ladies. So Carol and Laurie, welcome.
Thank you. We're going to share this. So just briefly, I've worked in the mediation system for over 16 years. Originally as a special ed teacher, that's what I did. And so I really love what we're doing. What we're bringing to you today are processes that are very family-centered, family-focused, how to include them, and we'll talk more about that. I want Laurie just to give a brief background for her and why she's here, and then we want to hear from you because we need to kind of gauge our audience, and we're going to try to do this a little bit like a family group conference.
Thank you. Thank you again for coming this morning. I'm Laurie Mcewen, and I've been doing family group conferencing for about 9 years. And prior to that, I had about 25 years of human service, family-oriented social work experience. And when I found family group conferencing, can everybody hear me? When I found family group conferencing, it was like, oh, this makes sense. Where has this been and where have I been for so many years? So it's something I really, really believe in. You see the power of it. You see how it really works. And you bring up a good point. We have been in families having disputes, discussions, conflicts forever, and that's not a bad thing. That's a natural thing. What we do is say, okay, let's deal with it, let's talk about it, let's everybody have a voice, let's work through this and get to the next step. So it's just acknowledging and figuring out who needs to be present and talking. It's really an effective way to move forward. So really, we're really excited to be doing our presenting today. So, okay.
Our goal today is just to let you know how families have been included in this process and what their reactions are. After we give you some statistics and things like that, we're actually going to have a DVD that was produced by the American Humane Association with responses from families prior to a family group conference, during the family group conference, and how they felt afterwards. But what will be helpful for us is if each of you can let us know whether or not I'd like you to say where you're from and whether or not you've been involved in a family group conference or a pre-hearing conference or other kind of family team meeting. We start with you, please.
Jackie Simmons. I did CPS for a long time in Omaha, and I'm the case coordinator now for the multidisciplinary teams, and I have been involved in both the pre-hearing conferences and the
Great.
Well, I'm work for a provider in Omaha, and our role in all of that is to make sure that there are facilities available for the family team meetings to take place.
Attorney acting as attorney in Lyman quite a bit of the time, and I've been involved several times.
Prosecutor in Phelps County, and I have been involved in several pre-hearing conferences.
Retired teacher from Columbus, Nebraska. I've had some retirement career. I've taken mediation training and affiliated with Nebraska Justice Center, and I've been involved in pre-hearing conferences and simulated family group conferences. Sandy Roden, volunteer coordinator for Heartland CASA, and I've also been involved in both.
He was trying to also a prosecutor, and also been involved in pre-hearing conferences, and stayed away from the family group conferences. We had just one thing we were curious about. That's definitely, that's a chilling effect to have prosecutors present at those things.
listening with Natasha of South Central Nebraska, and we've done the briefing.
I'm Judy Durkheim with Nebraska Families Collaborative and been involved in a number of areas. I've been a social worker for a few years.
A lot of experience. That's great. We
She asked
do
you
want to get to your questions, and certainly if we forget, don't let us forget about how we include attorneys and whether or not we include attorneys. I just want to say very briefly before we go to the statistics that a family group conference gets referred to a mediation center that provides that service. What we are able to do that the case manager can't do for HHS is spend a lot of time finding family members, organizing the meeting, getting good information, and providing for this often day-long meeting that includes meals and breaks and all those kinds of things. So you'll see a little bit more about the process. I don't know if you want to add any more before we go.
Well, I think one other key component of family group conferencing and having the facilitator come in is we do have that luxury of being able to do that prep work for those families, but also the key is we are perceived as neutral. We are not seen as attached to any particular service or owner of that case. And that isn't to say that people who come to the table try to remain neutral. They try to remain open as they deal with families, but that's an awfully hard thing to do, and the most important piece of that is the family doesn't perceive some people as neutral. So then to have us come in and be able to have this discussion, and truly our whole focus is keeping that family, the providers, the professionals focused on what the goal is set and moving forward, really gives kind of a sense of ease and a kind of sense, okay, maybe I'm a little more willing to listen and hear. So that neutrality is absolutely huge that you see with family group conferencing because we do come in as a separate party. So, okay. This is an art. Whoops.
This is a really great segue because one of the reasons we were asked to give this presentation is because of the 2008 CFSR report. If you want to go there, there are a couple of items that we need to let you know about, and the reason why family group conferencing is really important, not only, number one, to families, but the other reason is the state reports and the federal reports. Item 14 was how effective is the agency in preserving connections for children. And 18 was how effective is the agency in involving parents and children in the case planning process. You're just going to have to stand there. So the item 14 report was, this is an area needing improvement. So even though we were doing things, it's not happening enough. And the specific finding was the agency did not make efforts to preserve the child's important connections. You've heard a lot about that this week. And on item number 18, it was also an area needing improvement. You can read that, the specific findings. A lot more moms and children were involved, not a lot of dads involved in case planning. And in only 39% of the cases, the agency was seen to have been making diligent efforts to include the family in that case plan. And as Laurie was speaking, there's a fundamental lack of trust between families and Health and Human Services that impedes the agency's ability to involve the family. Pre-hearing conferences and family team meetings involve parents in resolving issues, but sometimes that neutrality piece is left out depending on how the pre-hearing conference is done, or if it's a family team meeting run by Health and Human Services, or if there's a neutral involved. We wanted to show you a little bit about what we see as the family involvement continuum. On this side where there's really a family voice in decision making, and on the other side how much it's the system that's involved. And these are things that are available to you, all of these slides on your little disc. Any questions about any of those or anything you want to add, Laurie?
Well, I was going to say something about the
Here.
team meetings, and team meetings are a little bit different in that they probably fall a little more into that middle category where it is you're asking for voices, you're asking for participation. However, it is in that middle category. We really, as a system, would like to kind of keep moving towards having more involvement, more extended family, really a true part of actually having that voice and making that plan and saying what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do to really kind of be more effective and more efficient. So.
We might say at this point, this is, in Nebraska, we do include guardians ad litem and parents' attorneys in the family group conference. Obviously, their role is very different because it's the family voice, but we also don't want the family coming and making a plan that ultimately the guardian ad litem in particular is not going to support in court. So that's another reason why we think it's helpful. And we've had several attorneys say to us, oh, I don't want to come, I don't need to do that. But after they get there, they go, oh, I learned a lot, positive things about my client or about the family situation that I probably wouldn't have heard before, because I'm trying to make a case or whatever. And who are the positive people in this child's life, particularly for the guardian ad litem. So it can be a very positive process for you too.
And especially when you're talking about, oftentimes when an attorney says, I don't need to come, I'm familiar, and it really shows a sense of trust. They know the process, they know it's not adversarial, they know that it's really geared towards the focus of the child and moving forward, and it's not a he said, she said in the back or a legalistic issue. However, when there's a guardian ad litem for a parent, for capacity issues, we really work with trying to make sure that guardian ad litem truly, we invite everybody, really try and listen to their schedules, but a guardian ad litem for a parent for capacity issues is really important to have at that table also, so they too can share in that information and really truly understand what's being discussed. And I think you brought up the question about a county attorney attending. We have not had county attorneys in Omaha attend. It was explained to me that it felt like it might be a little bit of a conflict of interest. However, I don't know if that's ever been present in your arena. We have had a judge participate in 2 or 3, which has been really interesting in pieces and parts of it, and they were there because it was it was a family group conference / youth circle, and that's a little bit more focused on this child who's 16, 17, aging out. And this judge, 3 different times was asked by this youth, gosh, you've been in my life for years. I've seen you on both the good sides and bad sides, ups and downs. I want you there as a support, and I really want you there to kind of hear all the good things I've done. So they participated for a short piece of that. And that was really interesting to watch the dynamics. It was fantastic, and the kid really blossomed. I mean, really was like, look, this is the side now you get to see me, having this discussion. So, and it's not so scary in the arena of the court hearing.
And we have had, again, county attorneys that are present in what we call expedited family group conferences, where it's a first removal. Maybe this is the first time the family's been involved, or it might be a voluntary case. It depends on each of the county attorneys. We serve 35 counties, so we never know for sure. But they're not there for the whole time. They're there to say, I'm not here to gather information. I'm here to inform you about the court process and what you might expect and what I'm looking for as a good result for this family. Not specifically, but if you can come together and create this kind of a plan, I will certainly support you in that manner. The American Humane Association, which is, they have an arm called Family Group Decision Making. They kind of shuddered when we said we were including attorneys and sometimes even the county attorney, but when we explained to them how the family reaction was and what their reaction was to that, they were like, okay, you've defined a process or an inclusion that's different in other places, but good for you. Go for it if that's what you need to do.
And Carol, you bring up a really good point. The family group conference is really fluid. We have a process, we have these parameters. However, when we look at each individual case, we are able to fashion somewhat and make sure that this is really individualized and helpful for this family, for the case manager who is asking for those goals, and asking for, gosh, how do we move this family forward? So it's really, that's one of the beauties of this process. We have our process, but we can really, tailor make it.
Because it's on this end of the continuum.
Excuse me. Mm-hmm.
Where the families are, as you know, families are all different.
And you brought up that you felt like perhaps, not to put you on the spot, but you said, is it chilling? And so when you hear that, what do you think? Does that make sense to you, or are you?
No, absolutely, and I think what she said, I think the perception on my part is they think the county attorney is there to obtain information
Right.
that may not be beneficial
Mhm.
to them in the long run, so
Mhm.
I guess I deliberately, or at least up to this point, have deliberately stayed away because I don't want to discourage the free exchange of discussion during those conferences.
Well, and in several counties, family group conference is a lot of preparation time. That doesn't mean just preparing the families for what that might look like, but that's for all the professionals who are going to be present also. We also look at family members as professionals. They really know their kids better than any of us do. But those who are paid to be in this child's life need to be prepared too so that they understand what their role is.
When we talk about prep time, it may take 20 hours to prep a case to really make sure that
Sometimes
everybody's in the
more.
right mindset to understand, what's going on in this and what's this going to look like and what are our roles. So it really takes a lot of effort.
Okay.
So.
We need to look at the clock, and there's some things we want you to do. So I'm going to go through this really quickly if you want to click. This is family group conference data when we had a pilot project, and then I think through the year 2000, general findings of the research that was done. The average family member is 7.6, 4.7 professionals. I don't know who that 0.7 person was, but in general, parents and families found the process fair and felt that they were heard, and a placement plan was developed 84% of the time. 94% of the plans recommended long-term placement with the parent or relative because new information was brought to light about how that was going to look. Again, these statistics are in your information if you want it, but in general, we really found that families thought they benefited greatly. Sometimes the information was skewed a little bit because they were asked to do this form after the family group conference, and maybe they just had their private family time and they didn't get along with somebody in their private family time, and so that affected the way they responded to some of the questions. Yes?
On the previous slide, you said there were 65 cases reviewed out of how many? You know?
I'm sorry, I don't know. But I need to, Vicki Weiss was responsible for doing most of this, so we can get that information from her. I apologize for that. Are we at the next slide? These are just kind of the questions that we asked about our preparation time and how that worked. It's difficult when you have a number of cases, but one of the things that's really important to us is that we have an in-person interview, if at all possible, with the parent or grandparent or person that is prospective, could be placement for permanency, that we do that ahead of time so we can try to answer some of their questions about what the process will be like. We also screen for domestic violence like we do for all of our other cases before we schedule a family group conference. We cannot make decisions for the family or make recommendations other than process and whether or not it's safe. So we have had to make decisions at times where grandpa would not be involved. I have an example for that where a case years and years ago, the court thought that grandpa should be involved. Grandpa wasn't accused of anything untoward with the children, but I learned because of this interview that he had raped his daughter-in-law. And so he was not appropriate to be present where they were making decisions about the children. Okay, so those are the kinds of decisions we can make. Now's the time when so we need to turn that part off and go to our video. You wondered. You wondered. And, you know, their talk about, you know, I found out that the social workers really, they do care about what happens to us, you know. I didn't know that before. And I can tell you a few protection and safety workers were just like blown away when family members would go up to them and thank them for their work or do things like that, which is really, really a positive thing in building that relationship. The other thing I want to say before Laurie talks a little bit is just that they make a plan and you hear all this good stuff, but we have to say to families all the time, today is wonderful. You have a lot of hard work ahead of you. This isn't going to change today because you were able to do this. But this is a thing that you can do yourself. You can have your own family meetings. You just need to figure out how that best is going to work for you. And then the other thing we provide through our contract after the family group conference is at least one follow-up meeting. That's part of that. Whether that's things are going great and we're going to dismiss the case, how are we going to use informal resources, or something has come up and we have to go to plan B. Okay.
And you heard them say sometimes, you know, Carol's talking about what is your hope for the family group conference. Sometimes on that first initial conversation, they have no idea. You heard them say immediate reaction is fear and, oh my gosh, are you coming into my home to nose around and I'm opening more information to you? Are you kidding? One more person? And so it takes a little bit of time to percolate and kind of settle for a little bit. And so we may talk to them again and say, have you thought about what are some concerns? You heard that word fear. What are your fears about this? And so suddenly they're getting to kind of talk about it, envision it, and we talk about what it looks like and what the process is and who's going to be there, so they don't see this chilling effect of somebody showing up that they weren't expecting. And suddenly they start settling in, and then they start having a lot of questions and thinking, well, can we do this? And can we talk about this? And say, yes, that's a perfect, those are great conversations you're going to bring up and talk about this family group conference. So that sense that they don't know what they're going to want and what they expect, that suddenly they start kind of turning. And it's interesting, you brought the families at the end. It's really amazing after you have this family group conference in the middle of it. I mean, at the beginning, you've got people saying, I'm not coming if they're coming, and they're not allowed in here, and you know, and so we work through a lot of that, and we always say, you know, if you choose not to come, that's your choice. However, this is your time to have a voice. Well, more than likely, those family members do come. But we have family members who literally won't face each other. They refer to each other as him and her, and very derogatory, very angry, a lot of tension. And then all of a sudden, you can just kind of see it slowly changing. They suddenly kind of start looking at each other, and then they start maybe using their name. And before at the end, you know, after they've had their private time, and it's not perfect in there, but suddenly they start talking to each other, and they're actually talking about maybe events that they're going to do after this. You know, how are we going to get together? Maybe we're going to have a family dinner again. You know, I didn't realize we used to be like this. Now we can get back to this again. And suddenly there's a different sense to that family, and you see that quite often as they've had this luxury of time and this arena that is just built around them being able to work through this process. And that's what this is about, giving them a real focus and time of being able to go there.
I just wanted to say one more thing about the neutrality piece that's also added to this, is that Laurie and I and our other facilitators are also trained family mediators and approved through the Nebraska Supreme Court. So if we have a custody issue, sometimes in private family time, instead of their usual time, we may leave the extended family together, and I'll take the parents into another room and actually mediate a parenting plan. But part of that expectation then is we go back to the family, both parents tell their family group how they want to parent in the future if their kids are able to come home to one or the other of them, and how then are you going to support us to make sure that we can get this done. So that's another advantage I feel, to have the trained person and the third-party neutral to be able to do that in the course of a family group conference. Of course, then probably have to take that to district court, but because we are approved mediators, it can be done that way.
You've talked about a few phases. Is there a structure or a process for the day? Or
There is a structure, and that's really important to lay out so people know where they're going. After the prep time, we usually get a referral. It takes about 30 days to get it to the table. Now, we will work within confines of timelines. Maybe there's a hearing coming up that the case manager would really like to have this type of a discussion prior to another review coming up. Once we get to the table, it's broken into 3 sections. We do the introductions, and you've got quite a large group of people there, and they're saying what roles they play and who they are and how long they've been in the family or working with the family. Then we talk about strengths. How often do you really get to identify strengths with a family? I mean, we are strength-based. We've set aside and carve out time for them to start saying, what are some strengths in light of what your goal is, what this discussion is going to be today. And suddenly they start talking, and they're a little bit shy at first, and then suddenly they start realizing, well, I didn't know you did that. Yeah, that's great. That's really going to help us here. And so they start opening up, and that's kind of one of the hardest parts because it's hard to talk about yourself. But suddenly, somebody's writing, and they look and like, okay, are you really doing that? I had no idea. That's really going to be a great benefit here. So it begins with the strengths. Then we talk about, and we segue into the concerns. And I really talk to families and people who are present. Concerns are not a bad thing. It's not like, oh, here they come. It may be a question that needs to be clarified. It may be just, how do we get over this bump, or what do we need to get to this next step? What else is out there to help us? So we really spend a lot of time, and we really urge people, you've taken off the day, you've had to get childcare, you've worked really hard to get to this table. Talk about the pink elephants in the table. And that's why we're there also, is to kind of keep that focus, keep that conversation flowing, and we're kind of reading and asking questions so that hopefully they feel that comfort to be able to start sharing some things that, okay, I really do want to talk about this because it's not going to work if we don't get this out there, okay? And then after that, we come back to the case manager and we say, what are your bottom lines? What are the critical issues that you have to see in this case plan or this family plan that you would like to see? But then we say, you know what, that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning. You get to be as creative and think outside the box. What else does your family, what else do you need to make this work? You know what you're best at. Figure out what else is going to make this so you don't come backwards again, okay? I forgot a step. After we do our introductions, the case manager talks about just real briefly where the case is in the line of the continuum of the court system, and then also talks about, just what it is that they would hope. When they made this referral, what were you hoping at that point? And so then after we do the bottom lines, the family goes into private time. And what's really interesting about that is we ask the family, who do you want in there? Because we're not just talking about blood relatives, we're talking about the people who are their supports in their system that they feel like is like their family. They get to identify who else they would like to have in that private time.
Like a pastor or a neighbor.
At that point, typically the professionals leave. They always get a copy of everything that the plan that we type up, at the end. And so the family can spend anywhere, it's up to them how well they progress through. We actually help the family set them up and say, somebody be a timekeeper, somebody help keep you focused on what you're trying to accomplish. Somebody be the mediator. You may get to a point where you're just getting stuck on something. Can somebody say, hey guys, we're getting stuck here, let's go forward. We tell them we'll come back in and kind of help them if they're stuck, but we're not going to give them the answers because it's really their time. But again, we urge them, you've been here for 2 hours already. Don't get stuck here. Keep going, okay? And they do come up with plans. And so then as they are done, the case manager, the facilitator, and then whoever else is lagging out there will come back in if they would like, and then they present their plan. And we reality test it. We ask questions. The case manager may dot the I's and cross the T's. Yes, we can do that. No, we can't do that piece of it. But that's something your family can provide. Really putting it back on what's going to be your family going to be able to do. Who are they going to be your informal supports, when the case drops out. Oops, sorry. So that's the process.
Concerns is something that it's often difficult for them to have, but we like the family to express concerns first so that the case manager or the guardian ad litem don't have to do that. But it's also important to me, and those of you who have been in my family group conferences know that I say, okay, it's time to step up on the soapbox and say, think again about the concerns that brought you here today. We have to get those up here as concerns, or your plan won't be all that it needs to be so that you're not back here again. So, and as part of a facilitator, we're listening all the time, and that's how we encourage that. Unfortunately, with our time frames right now, we don't have enough time to talk about pre-hearing conferences. But several of you know about those. In the areas that we serve, not all of the county, but some of the judges participate, and that's separate contract. That's a court-connected program that will not be affected by the reforms that are happening within Health and Human Services itself. And I just want to give one quick story about why a pre-hearing conference is so effective. They have good research about how kids are in care less time and all that. But with the questions we ask when there's a neutral facilitator there are, what are those things that are missing? And I know that a case that was done in Omaha that Deborah Blue was facilitating was, they found out that this girl who was now in care of the state had been taking dance lessons, and she thought she was going to miss her recital. And because they had a pre-hearing conference and these questions were asked, they were able to make opportunity for her to go to her recital, and then maybe even some family members to be there to support her. And Another one that I did, we found out that that mom had been saving money so her daughter could go to this camp. But now mom was gonna be in treatment and the girl was gonna be in foster care, so how were they gonna make that happen? And they were able to make that decision at a pre-hearing conference. And the best thing about pre-hearing conferences is that's an opportunity for the guardian ad litem, Health and Human Services, CASA, other service providers to let this family know that we're here to help you and keep your family together in a safe way. We're not here to take your children.
And asking those questions, dealing with that tutu in the dance lessons showed, I mean, truly was action behind the words. Oh, they're listening, they're asking. Suddenly that starts turning that, hopefully that parent to kind of relax and calm down and go, okay, maybe I'm a little more ready to kind of listen and talk, and I can maybe start building this trust. So it truly is a way to say, listen, you know, this is going to be a team effort here. And that was showing that action in play. So it was pretty powerful.
Any questions that you have that we really need to try to do in 30 seconds?
Can you talk just a little bit about using ADR when you're approaching termination of home rights?
Well, and we, you know, we don't call it particularly, it comes to us as a referral as a family conference, okay? And so it's, but it is a little bit different. However,
The new process, I think she's talking about.
okay,
If we're gonna do facilitated
the pre-hearing.
I don't know. I mean, I've just heard it's been used, and I don't know how it's been used or.
We have used it in the past, and, I mean, we have used it where the case manager has come to us and said, you know, the information has been given to the county attorney. So it's looking a little bit dismal here in terms of reunification. However, I want to do two things. I want to make sure that I've heard everything we have provided for this family, anything and everything that they've had a chance to do what we need to do. I'm not sure if we've heard them, okay? So with the idea that you've got the concurrent plan, you've got reunification still, but also termination is looking like it's going forward. And so they bring it to the table, and so we are very careful, and we talk about, okay, first of all, let's make sure that this family understands what all those words are and what all those terms mean and all the impacts of what a relinquishment looks like, what does termination look like, what is reunification, and how has that been for you? And so we talk about all of that. We've had, we then also make part of that discussion real clearly at each one of those venues. If you have a termination or these children are going into adoption, you know, through relinquishment or whatever, what are some family members? What would that look like? And possibly there's no guarantees of open adoptions, but what would that look like? And what kind of things would be expected of relatives if there were going to be that connection? You know,
Do you pull the relatives with potential adoptive families?
We do, absolutely, we do. Absolutely. And at first it's a really scary conversation beginning. But then as they start seeing it's really informative and it's really trying to make sure that this family has all their information, the case manager, you know, is really asking lots of questions. It kind of calms that arena down. So yes, we bring in the relatives and they start, you know, asking information and they become comfortable and they're asking more, you know, more clarity and in the foster parents also.
It is a complete focus though, just on,
Yes.
on those issues and
Absolutely.
not the broader
Absolutely.
picture. Kelly.
There was a session yesterday too on CPR mediation, and we videotaped it and we posted it online.
Oh, okay.
And actually following right now, Siri and Judge Rowland are doing one at 9:45
The pre-hearing conference and the permanency stage.
at the permanency stage,
Permanency hearing stage.
which is what I think you're looking at.
I don't know, we don't do conferences after the beginning.
Well, this is something new that we're starting, and maybe it's probably, there's gonna be a pilot project starting, so if you, and there's some people that have been doing them in Judge Rowland's court, and, the facilitator who's been doing those, she's presenting with the judge.
You look
Thank you
confused.
for coming. Thank you.